Okay, so let's unpack this. We all spend a lot of time, trying to understand human behavior,
Mm.
right? Why people do what they do. It's fundamental. Navigating relationships, work,
Hmm.
just feeling comfortable in the world, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's a hidden side to that, a darker side, maybe. The deliberate use of psychology to influence, persuade, sometimes control others, often for, well, selfish reasons.
Exactly. And that's the territory we're exploring today. We've got this stack of sources here, diving deep into what people often call dark psychology
Right.
and the tactics, the actual techniques people use to manipulate and control.
So our mission here with this material, it's really to cut through the noise,
Mm.
extract the core stuff you need to know.
Yeah, get to the heart of it.
We want to understand what dark psychology actually is, how to spot the traits in people using it, how it affects you if you're targeted, who's most vulnerable.
And crucially, how to protect yourself.
Exactly. Most importantly, that. This deep dive, it's meant to be a shortcut, you know?
Mhm.
Recognize these dynamics, maybe strengthen your defenses a bit.
Think of it like getting a peek at the manipulator's playbook. Not so you can use it, obviously,
No, definitely not.
but so you can spot it instantly, ideally, when someone tries to run it on you.
Perfect. Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. What exactly is dark psychology? How's it different from, just general psychology?
Okay. So, at its core, these sources present it as, well, the art and science of manipulation, mind control, even.
Mind control.
Yeah. General psychology looks at how the mind usually works, right? How we think, feel, interact, kind of the normal stuff. But dark psychology zooms in on the predatory side.
Predatory, that sounds.
Yeah, intense.
It is. It's looking at people who see others as potential prey.
Yeah.
The focus is on the tactics these, well, cunning or maybe just ill-mannered people use to manipulate, persuade, pressure people.
For their own gain, usually. Often, yeah, for personal gain. But interestingly, the material points out that sometimes, maybe more nowadays, the motivation isn't just gain, it's simply to bring others down or cause harm.
Huh. So even if there's no direct benefit to them other than just doing it,
That seems to be a key point here, yeah. There's usually some kind of motivational force, but that force could just be the pleasure they get from seeing someone distressed.
which is, yeah, pretty disturbing. Okay, so motivation, a predatory mindset. And the sources say we can identify people who do this by looking at certain traits, something called the dark tetrad.
Right, the dark tetrad. It's these four traits that often pop up in people who engage in this stuff. Understanding them helps you recognize who you might be dealing with.
Okay?
Narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and sadism.
All right, let's peel back the layers on those. First one, narcissism. We hear that word thrown around a lot.
We do. It goes back to the Greek myth, Narcissus, charming hunter, mistreated people, got cursed to fall in love with his own reflection, couldn't leave the pool, just stared at himself until he, well, died.
Right, I remember that story.
So the modern trait, as it's described here, it's not really self-love. It's more like this fierce devotion to a fake image they project.
Ah, okay. So they don't love themselves. They love the idea of themselves they show others.
Kind of, yeah. They love this fabrication and they protect that image like crazy, sometimes doing good things to maintain it, sometimes causing harm.
So if they seem kind, it's not always genuine.
Not necessarily, no. It often serves the purpose of maintaining that image. Key traits you see are high grandiosity, this sense of superiority.
Like they're better than everyone else.
Fundamentally different, yeah. Better abilities, more important. Also a drive for dominance, controlling people around them, and entitlement, a really strong sense they deserve special treatment.
How does that play out in relationships?
Well, they can be really good at starting them. They come across as friendly, charming, but often they see people less as like friends or partners and more as contacts.
Contacts to be used.
Pretty much. For their own goals, motivation. They tend to surround themselves with people who just agree with them, if you disagree. First, they'll try to manipulate you into seeing it their way.
And if that doesn't work,
They'll likely distance themselves, or even badmouth you, sometimes for revenge, sometimes to, quote, teach you a lesson.
wow.
So the people who seem happy around a narcissist, often they're just agreeable yes men, you know.
That's, yeah, a striking dynamic. Okay, moving on. Machiavellianism. What's the core of this one?
Deceitfulness and manipulation. That's really it. People high in this trait, they don't really distinguish right from wrong based on how it affects others.
So,
If something benefits them, it's basically justifiable in their eyes, even if it makes other people suffer a lot.
sounds like they see life as a game Winners and losers.
That's a really good way to put it, like a zero-sum game. For them
Yeah.
to win, someone else has to lose. And they'll rationally harm others, but unlike maybe sadists, they do it for calculated personal benefit, not just for the fun of it. They weigh the risks and rewards.
And this comes from Niccolo Machiavelli, right? The author of The Prince, that book about politicians manipulating people for power.
Exactly. The philosophy lines up. If harming others gets you what you want, do it. The book, as the material notes, basically teaches using cunning, deceit, manipulation as tools to reach your goals.
And relationships for these individuals.
Generally shallow, because their self-interest always comes first. Sacrificing for someone else, not really their thing.
What about empathy?
They have what's sometimes called cold empathy. They can understand you're upset, like intellectually. They can read the signs.
They don't feel it.
Exactly. They don't feel your distress, and they're not really moved to help. In fact, they might see your vulnerability as an opportunity, something to exploit.
Okay.
Although they are rational, so they might show some concern if they think hurting you emotionally could backfire on them, lead to retaliation.
Right. Calculated self-interest again. Where do we tend to see this trait most often?
The material points towards white-collar crime, and maybe unsurprisingly given the name, politics.
Makes sense. Okay. Next up is psychopathy, described as the most dangerous.
Yeah, generally considered the most malevolent of the four, capable of causing the most harm.
What makes it so destructive?
Well, it's a combination of near total lack of empathy, like they genuinely don't care if others suffer, plus high impulsiveness.
Acting without thinking of consequences.
Pretty much, which
Yeah.
makes them highly unpredictable and potentially very dangerous.
Is this nature or nurture? Are people born this way?
So the distinction the sources make here is interesting. They suggest psychopathy is something you're likely born with, unlike sociopathy, which is seen as more learned from the environment.
Okay.
But environment is still critical. Someone with these tendencies raised in a caring family might develop relatively normally. But put them in a violent or abusive environment, that can really foster the dangerous expression of those traits.
That environmental factor is key. Okay, last one. Sadism. This was added later to the original Dark Triad, right?
That's right, yeah. It wasn't in the original three. Key traits are callousness, ruthlessness, disregard for feelings, impulsivity, manipulation. Similar overlaps with the others in some ways.
But what's the core motivation? Is it gain, like Machiavellianism?
No, the motivation here is internal. They're driven to cause pain, suffering. To others, even innocent people. Why? Because they find cruelty enjoyable, exciting even.
Just for the sake of it.
Pretty much. They might even cause emotional pain knowing it could hurt them in return because the act itself is so rewarding to them.
So seeing others suffer is the reward.
Exactly. They actually enjoy watching people in distress. The material even mentions a link to BDSM fantasy for some individuals, deriving pleasure from that dynamic.
How do you protect yourself from someone like that?
The sources are pretty clear on this. You either have to confront them or get away. Distance yourself.
Why?
Because not resisting, letting them cause you pain or stress, that's like giving them a green light, permission to continue. You have to draw a line, even if it's just leaving the situation.
Can you give an example, like how it might play out?
Okay, say you tell a sadist a secret. You trust them. They might deliberately reveal it, not to gain anything specific, but just because your distress, your embarrassment, that gives them pleasure.
Ah, I see. So Machiavellian might reveal it to ruin your reputation for their own advancement?
Right.
The sadist does it just for the kick of seeing you suffer.
Precisely. That difference in motivation is, chilling.
And can you encounter this in, like, everyday life?
Yeah?
Work, maybe?
Unfortunately, yes. The material suggests you can find them in workplaces, like a boss who heaps on unnecessary stress. Not because the job demands it, but because they seem to enjoy seeing their employees squirm.
Okay. So understanding these traits, narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, sadism, helps us spot who might be manipulative. But how do they actually do it? What are the specific psychological tactics? The playbook, as you called it.
Right, now we get into the how, the actual manipulation techniques. The sources detail quite a few key tactics.
Let's start with one that gets talked about a lot now, gaslighting.
Yeah, gaslighting, the tactic specifically designed to make you doubt yourself, your own memory, your perception of reality, even your sanity.
It comes in that old movie, right? Where the husband tries to make his wife think she's crazy by messing with the gaslights.
Exactly that movie. It perfectly illustrates the core idea. Create a false reality, then convince the target they're the one who's mistaken or unstable.
How does this actually look in real life? What are some scenarios?
Well, imagine a dependent relationship. It might start small. Obvious lies the manipulator just denies confidently when you confront them.
And the target.
Maybe because they're a pendant or just stressed, they start ignoring the lies. Then they start accepting bigger lies as if they're true. It's this constant psychological pressure that just wears you down.
Okay, that's one way.
Another way is isolation. Cut the target off from others. Then, especially if the target lacks confidence, make them doubt their basic understanding of life. Blame their failures on their supposed lack of grasp.
And then the manipulator steps in.
Exactly. They take over making major decisions about relationships, arguments, whatever. But they do it while making the target feel loved, making them think they're still somehow in control or making their own choices.
That's terrifying, losing your grip on reality, your own agency.
It really is. And the material notes this isn't just, personal. It can happen on a societal level. Using stereotypes, say, about certain groups lacking worldly understanding, if people internalize those beliefs, they become easier to gaslight.
What's a key warning sign? Something to watch out for early on.
A really crucial early sign is denial, especially denial when confronted with uncomfortable truths you both know are true. If someone close, maybe a new partner, consistently denies facts like that, the material suggests is a potential red flag for future gaslighting.
Good one to remember. Okay, what's another major tactic?
Projection. This is where someone, especially toxic people, takes their own negative stuff, emotions, behaviors, faults, and basically pins it on someone else.
So they can't handle their own issues, so they make them your issues.
Pretty much, yeah. Constant blaming. Even for tiny things. It's a way to offload their own negativity. Like the boss who's always late but blames you for being late.
Or the classic example of the cheating partner accusing the faithful one.
Exactly that. Perfect example.
And the effect on the target is?
It puts you immediately on the defensive. You're constantly trying to explain yourself, justify your actions, even when you did nothing wrong. And that automatically puts the manipulator in control, right? You're reacting to their accusations. They're setting the terms.
Yeah, you're stuck in reaction mode.
Right. And it can happen publicly, too, forcing you to defend yourself in front of others, making you look bad, maybe.
So how do you handle that? What's the advice?
The material suggests trying to sidestep the emotional trap. Recognize it for what it is, a control tactic, psychological pressure, and try to respond with logic, not get sucked into defending yourself against baseless claims. Easier said than done, sometimes.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, isolation. We touched on that with narcissism, but it's a tactic in itself.
Oh, absolutely fundamental. Manipulators actively work to separate you from your support system. Family, friends, anyone who cares about you and might offer perspective.
Why is that so critical for them?
Because your support system is your defense. They give you help, perspective, people who can see the manipulation and call it out. They make the manipulator's job way harder.
So they cut off those lifelines.
Exactly. Cut off your outlets for sharing, for reality checks. They might badmouth your friends to you or trash talk you to your friends, or just try to convince you they're the only person who truly understands or supports you.
So maintaining those healthy connections is a really key defense then.
Hugely important, yeah. Manipulation is just much, much harder when you've got multiple viewpoints and people in your corner.
Okay. Next, positive reinforcement. We usually think of that as a good thing, right? Like training a dog.
And it often is. But like many tools, it can be twisted. Used manipulatively to control behavior, force changes, or exploit someone.
How so?
Think of an abusive partner who showers you with gifts or affection after an abusive episode.
To stop you from telling anyone or leaving.
Precisely. Or a toxic spouse who gives extra love after mistreating their partner, reinforcing the idea that staying and enduring the abuse is part of true love.
Oh.
Or a boss offering a sudden promotion to keep an employee quiet about something illegal they discovered. Or even politicians making big announcements or offering handouts right before an election, rewarding the public to secure votes, maybe after they've spent years undermining things.
It's weaponizing rewards.
Yeah.
So what about the flip side? Taking away something negative.
That's negative reinforcement. It's removing something unpleasant to increase a desired behavior. Manipulatively, it's about getting you to do what they want by removing the threat of something bad.
Give me an example.
A partner stops yelling or giving the silent treatment if you comply with their wishes. The unpleasant yelling stops, so you're reinforced to comply next time. Or a government hints at launching investigations into critical media outlets.
And the criticism stops to avoid the hassle.
Exactly. The negative stimulus, the threat of investigation, is removed when the desired behavior-stopping criticism occurs. And the material points out this is different from punishment. which adds something bad, like taking away your phone. Negative reinforcement removes something bad, like the yelling stopping.
Got it. What about more straightforward pressure tactics, like
Okay.
nagging, yelling, the silent treatment? Are those considered manipulation?
Oh, yeah, they're definitely in the toolkit. Nagging, or hectoring as the material calls it, is that repeated requesting, creating tension until you just give in to make it stop.
Parents do that with kids sometimes, right?
Sure, could be legitimate there, but it's manipulative when it feels like a demand, especially if you're dependent on the person or scared of making them angry.
Eh,
Less dangerous than the dark traits, maybe, unless the nagger has those
The
traits.
yelling or crying loudly.
That creates discomfort, fear, can force compliance. Or it can be used to dominate a conversation, shut down rational argument if they feel like they're losing. Or, used publicly, it can be a performance to gain sympathy.
Portraying themselves as the victim.
Exactly. Making the real victim's reaction look like the problem. Though you have to be careful, right? Not all yelling or crying is manipulation. Someone genuinely suffering might react that way. You need context.
True. And the silent treatment. Love withdrawal.
That's withholding communication, affection as punishment. Works best if there's emotional dependency. It creates this awful psychological tension. You comply to get back in their good graces, to get that affection back. It leverages our basic human need for approval.
Using our need for connection against us. Okay, what about the sneakier stuff? Covert tactics.
Right. That brings us to things like covert intimidation and guilt tripping, often used by what the material calls covert aggressive personalities.
Hmm.
Wolves in sheep's clothing, good public face, dangerous hidden side.
So covert intimidation, how does that work?
It's subtle. Instilling fear using what they know about your desires or fears. A boss hinting your promotion hinges on, say, doing personal favors, leveraging your desire for the promotion.
Or a partner playing on your fear of being alone.
Exactly. Saying things like, you'll never find anyone else if you try to leave. Using your fear against you, but subtly.
And guilt tripping. We all know that one.
Yeah, making you feel guilty or ashamed to manipulate you. Uses compassion, pity, sympathy against you. They might make you doubt yourself. Are you sure you can handle that? Before asking you to step aside. Make you anxious by dredging up old mistakes right before making a demand.
Making you feel indebted.
Oh, yeah. Constantly reminding you of past favors to demand compliance now. Different from healthy gratitude, this feels like an obligation. Or making you feel selfish, accusing you of it if you don't do what they want, so you bend over backwards to prove you're not selfish.
This feels very emotionally charged.
It is, totally based on emotion, not reason. That's why manipulators often build that emotional connection first, then leverage the guilt, like a partner saying, you don't trust me, to pressure you. Or if you really loved me, you'd buy me this expensive thing.
Making it about love or trust when it's really about control or stuff.
Precisely. And again, material warns. If a new partner constantly guilt trips their family or friends, red flag. They'll likely do it to you eventually.
Another one to watch for. What about shaming? How is that used?
Shaming leverages social constructs, what society deems shameful, which varies wildly, right?
Yeah.
Nudity norms, for example. The manipulator convinces you that you should feel shame about something, maybe something perfectly normal, or they threaten to reveal a real secret to cause social embarrassment if you don't comply.
Like threatening to tell your parents you smoke if you don't lend them money.
Classic example. Or slut shaming, which is very gender specific, or revenge shaming, threatening to release private photos or videos. The material really emphasizes being careful about sharing that kind of media.
Who uses shaming most?
Machiavellians are apparently experts, but narcissists, sadists, psychopaths use it too. It's a powerful tool if someone knows your vulnerabilities.
Okay, vilifying the victim. That sounds particularly nasty.
It really is. Making the person who is actually being manipulated look like the abuser or the bad guy.
Who does this?
Covert narcissists and Machiavellians are supposedly best at it because they're so good at maintaining that innocent public image.
How does it work? How do they pull it off?
Okay, imagine a manipulator constantly poking and prodding their victim. Mind games, subtle abuse over time. Eventually, the victim snaps, yells, cries, has an emotional breakdown.
Which is understandable under pressure.
Right. But the manipulator stays perfectly calm, looks innocent, maybe even concerned. So, to outsiders, the victim looks unstable, like they have anger issues. The manipulator looks like the patient wronged party.
Using the victim's reaction against them.
Exactly. Or they might even convince the victim themselves that they are the abuser, especially if the victim is dependent or has low self-esteem. They'll blame the victim for the manipulator's own bad behavior, like, you made me yell because you.
That's incredibly twisted.
It is a big sign. Someone who constantly blames everyone else for everything that goes wrong. Eventually, they'll likely blame you too. And they don't feel guilty because, in their mind, they're justified, they're superior, or the world just works this way, you know?
How is that different from playing the victim? Sounds similar.
Similar outcome sometimes, but the tactic is different. Playing the victim is when the manipulator pretends to be suffering or wronged when they're not genuinely the victim in that situation, specifically to gain sympathy or support.
From the real victim or from others?
Both. They might emphasize their own hardships to make the real victim feel sorry for them and back off or help them, or they might tell outsiders how much the real victim has wronged them, making the victim look bad and isolating them.
Like the partner who claims leaving is abandoning them when they need you most.
Perfect example. That's playing the victim to induce guilt. Or someone bringing up their tragic past to deflect from their current bad behavior. Or exaggerating vulnerability to gain sympathy and control.
And they might bring up sacrifices they've made.
Oh yeah, look how much I've suffered for you, making you feel indebted, ungrateful, leveraging that natural sense of obligation, but twisting it to control your choices.
Okay, playing the servant role. What's that about?
This is the manipulator pretending to act for the greater good, for others' benefit, a noble cause, public service, while secretly pushing their own agenda.
Who's good at this?
Machiavellians and psychopaths are apparently pros. Narcissists, maybe less so. You see it sometimes with politicians, certain religious leaders, maybe even some people claiming to do social work, but really serving themselves.
Like a politician pretending loyalty for years, just waiting for their chance.
Exactly. Or religious figures brainwashing followers while claiming divine service, but really seeking power or wealth. Or NGOs that look good on paper, but mainly benefit the founders. The material uses the golden cage analogy here.
The golden cage?
Yeah, people willingly enter a situation, maybe a relationship, a job for perceived benefits like security or status, but they lose their freedom, their autonomy. They're comfortable, maybe, but trapped, missing out on real-life experiences.
Sacrificing freedom for comfort. Okay, seduction. How is that manipulated? It's part of romance, right?
It absolutely can be. But it becomes manipulative when used by someone with malicious intent. And it's often the very first tactic they use.
Why first?
To build that emotional connection and trust really fast. Lavish attention, praise, flattery, making the target feel incredibly special, seen, valued.
Playing on our need for validation.
Exactly. We all have that bit of narcissism, that need to feel good about ourselves. They leverage that, make you feel amazing, so you let your guard down, become vulnerable.
So even if you kind of see the flattery for what it is, just playing along is risky.
Very risky, according to the sources. Even if you think you're just having fun, you can get emotionally entangled without realizing it, especially if you're not fully aware of your own vulnerabilities, your own desire for that validation.
Lack of self-awareness makes you susceptible. Okay, projecting the blame or the blame game. We talked about projection. How is this different?
The material presents it as a part of projection, specifically the act of shifting responsibility for your own intentions, motives, or bad behavior onto someone else.
So it's the active blaming part.
Kind of, yeah. Normal people might do it subconsciously sometimes, feel guilty later. But dark personalities, they're expert at it. No guilt, no cognitive dissonance. They might even project their faults onto you and try to make you feel bad about it at the same time if they're sadistic.
How subtle can it be?
Very. Skillful manipulators can blame others indirectly, subtly influence how others see the target without making direct accusations. A sign. Someone responds to being called out for wrongdoing by immediately launching into their own sob story, their difficult life, instead of just apologizing.
Deflecting blame with victimhood. Got it. And finally, brazening anger.
This is using anger strategically. Yelling, shouting, abuse, threats, not just losing your temper, but using anger as a weapon to control how others react.
Shut down discussion. Intimidate.
Exactly. Prevent the target from pursuing whatever topic made them angry. The long-term effect. It makes targets doubt themselves, doubt their own viewpoints. They start avoiding challenging the angry person, maybe even start agreeing with them just to keep the peace.
Like in a group of friends, if one person always blows up when challenged.
Yeah. Eventually, others just stop challenging them. It changes the whole dynamic through intimidation.
Okay, wow. That's a lot of tactics. We've covered the who, the traits, and the how, the tactics.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what does this actually do to a person? What are the impacts if you're on the receiving end?
Right. The sources identify four main ways manipulators affect their targets, four main games they play against your mind, basically.
Okay, what's the first one?
Destroying your willpower, sometimes called ego depletion.
Willpower, like self-control.
Exactly. Your capacity for self-control, making conscious decisions. Think of it like a muscle. It gets tired, it's limited, and it needs time to recover.
And manipulators target this.
Strategically, they
Ah.
create situations that force you to constantly use that willpower muscle,
Right.
like trying desperately to stay calm when they're deliberately provoking you.
Why? To wear you down.
Precisely. Deplete your reserve. So when bigger challenges come along or when they really push your buttons, you've got nothing left. You can't cope, you lose control, maybe react in a way that makes you look bad.
Like provoking you into a public outburst.
Classic example. They stay calm, look like the victim, while you look immature or unstable because your willpower was already exhausted from dealing with their constant digs.
That's insidious. Can't willpower be strengthened?
The good news is yes. Like a muscle, the material suggests it can be strengthened with practice, with exercise over time.
Okay, good to know. What's the second major impact?
Destroying your self-esteem. Low self-esteem makes you incredibly vulnerable. It's a prime target for manipulators, and they often work on it slowly, steadily, over months or even years.
How do they do that, especially if they've already built trust? Seems counterintuitive.
Well, once that trust is there, they leverage the fact that you care what they think. They use carefully worded phrases, often subtle digs disguised as observations or even jokes, to attack or minimize your achievements, your abilities.
Planting seeds of doubt.
Exactly, making you feel insecure. And because it's coming from someone you trust, someone you're close to, your psychological defenses are down, the attacks hit harder. They might say your success was just luck, or try to sow distrust between you and your friends to isolate you further, making you rely on them more.
And what happens when your self-esteem is low?
You become more reactive. You might become a people pleaser, terrified of upsetting anyone. You lose the ability to set and maintain healthy boundaries. Basically, you become much easier to exploit.
You're like having your psychological armor full of holes. Okay, third impact. Passive-aggressive revenge.
This is often the tool of insecure, jealous people, people who can't or won't confront you directly. It's driven by envy, maybe a sense of misery loves company.
Narcissists might do this too.
Yeah, because they can't stand seeing others happy or, heaven forbid, superior to them in some way.
So how does this passive aggression manifest? What does it look like?
They might pretend to be your friend, act supportive to your face, but secretly undermine you. Try to ensure you fail, or at least don't succeed more than they do. They'll sow distrust, maybe try to isolate you, chip away at your willpower and self-esteem, but all very subtly.
Will they offer any help?
Sometimes, yeah, but often just enough to keep you afloat, keep you dependent maybe, but never enough for you to really thrive or get ahead of them.
How can you recognize this behavior?
Look for things like disguised verbal hostility insults framed as jokes, constant negative gossip behind your back, habitual criticism, even of small things, invalidating your thoughts, feelings, contributions. Often this comes from people surprisingly close to you. The frenemy dynamic.
Yeah, attacking from within your own camp. That's tough. What's the fourth main impact?
Confusing your reality. This ties back to gaslighting, but it's broader. It's about making you doubt your own perception, your memory, the information you receive.
And this is about achieving ultimate control.
You got it. If a manipulator can control how you see reality, they gain immense power. They can dictate what you think, what you feel, what you value. It's deep manipulation.
Why do they do this? What's the goal?
Abusive partners might do it to stop you seeking help. They make you distrust potential helpers, or even doubt that the abuse was real or intentional. Psychopaths might do it deliberately just to weaken you mentally, make you easier to control. Narcissists might even do it unintentionally because their own perception of reality is so distorted by their sense of superiority. And sadists or trolls, they might do it just for the sick pleasure of seeing you confused and distressed.
Controlling someone's perception of reality.
Yeah,
That's about as deep as manipulation gets, isn't it?
it really is.
So, knowing what they do to you,
Mhm.
who is most likely to fall prey to this? What makes someone a favorite target?
Manipulators are often quite good at spotting vulnerabilities. Certain traits or states definitely make people easier targets.
Like who? What's the top of the list?
People who are emotionally insecure and fragile. Insecure folks are often easy to spot. They might get overly defensive when criticized, make excuses, blame others. They're uncomfortable with conflict. Social anxiety can make you stand out too. Manipulators might test for this, provoke you a bit, see how you react. Then they exploit it, maybe by ramping up your anxiety or getting you to agree to things just to avoid a confrontation.
And fragility.
That's maybe someone who seems okay on the surface but reacts really excessively, has breakdowns over small things. This can also be temporary, maybe after a trauma, a big failure, a breakup. You're just more vulnerable then. Manipulators might actually wait for you to be in that state, build trust, then move in to exploit it. If they provoke you into a public meltdown, it makes you look bad.
Targeting people when they're down, that's cold. Who else is vulnerable?
Highly sensitive people, or HSPs.
What are their traits?
They tend to process things very deeply. Highly aware of their environment, others' emotions, body language. Very empathetic, avoid cruelty. Good at reading people, but often can't hide their own reactions. Nervousness shows easily. Often introverted, easily drained by social interaction.
How does that sensitivity make them a target?
Well, their politeness and strong desire to avoid offending anyone can make it really hard for them to say no, even to unreasonable requests. So they get exploited. They might also jump to conclusions about negative intent, get preoccupied, which drains them further. They often fear rushing intimacy or losing their identity in relationships, which manipulators can exploit by pushing for closeness very quickly to gain control. Isolation is also a common tactic against HSPs because their social battery drains faster.
Okay. Fear of loneliness or abandonment. That seems like a big vulnerability.
Oh, it's huge. A really extreme fear of being alone or losing someone close. It keeps people trapped in incredibly toxic, abusive relationships long after they should have left.
And manipulators pick up on this.
Absolutely. They recognize that fear and they play on it, exacerbate it, make the target feel like leaving is impossible, terrifying, which leads the target to justify the manipulator's awful behavior, become even more dependent.
What about people pleasers, the ones who dread disappointing others?
This is driven by fear. Fear of upsetting people, fear of embarrassment, fear of rejection. Their self-worth gets tangled up in what others think of them.
Can this be positive sometimes?
Sure, like parents wanting to provide for kids or kids studying hard to make parents proud. But with a manipulator, it's damaging. They exploit it by doing tiny favors to create this false sense of obligation. Then they demand much bigger favors back. The people pleaser complies because they can't bear to disappoint, even if it means sacrificing their own happiness or peace. It leads to avoiding conflict at all costs, saying yes when they should say no, being easily swayed.
And lastly, emotional dependence.
This is described as a milder version of dependent personality disorder. Often stems from things like childhood abandonment issues or really low self-esteem.
What does it look like?
Fear of losing loved ones, so they stay in bad situations. People-pleasing to the extreme, can't say no even to things they know are wrong. Submissive behavior. Easily manipulated because their main drive is keeping others happy, securing that connection no matter the cost to themselves.
It's sobering to see how these internal states and fears open the door to manipulation.
Yeah.
So we know the who, the how, the impact, the targets. Now, the crucial part, how do you actually protect yourself?
Right. And the core message from these sources is really powerful, I think. It boils down to this. You can only control yourself. Protection isn't about learning clever counter-manipulation tricks.
It's not about fighting fire with fire.
No. It's about changing your own personality, your own approach. It's fundamentally inner work, building resilience from the inside out.
Okay, so where does that inner work start? What's step one?
Acceptance. Accepting the reality of your situation. Even if that reality is painful, disturbing, seems impossible to change, it means not denying it, not trying to explain it away or minimize it. Denial is a defense, sure, but it stops you from actually dealing with the reality because you haven't admitted it exists.
So, facing the painful truth is the necessary first move.
It's presented as the absolute foundation for any growth or change. Acceptance brings mental clarity. It allows you to make better decisions based on what's actually happening, not what you wish was happening. Denial just keeps you stuck, and it makes you vulnerable because manipulators thrive in distorted realities.
Can you give an example of how denial traps someone?
Think of Vicky's story we looked at. His whole struggle with Sunny, the manipulator, was rooted in his denial of Sunny's true nature. He couldn't accept how dangerous Sunny was, probably because of his own insecurities and dependence. It wasn't until he finally accepted that reality, painful as it was, that he could start to change and grow, even though he'd already hit rock bottom. The takeaway is, don't wait until everything's destroyed. Try to accept reality sooner.
So, practically speaking, accept that toxic people exist. Identify who in your life might be exploiting your weaknesses.
Exactly. That conscious acknowledgement gives you back some control. Once you accept, okay, this dynamic is toxic, this person is manipulative, then you can decide what to do. Distance yourself. Set firm boundaries. And acceptance isn't passive resignation. It's not saying, okay, I guess I have to live with this. It's consciously understanding the situation so you can take steps to improve it.
How does that play out in, say, an argument?
If a manipulative partner falsely accuses you, you don't really love me. Instead of getting sucked into proving them wrong based on their frame, first accept your reality. Do you love them? If the answer inside you is yes, then you recognize their statement as manipulation. You can respond lovingly, perhaps, but firmly stand your ground against the manipulative tactic itself because you're anchored in your own accepted truth. You don't get lost in their narrative.
That's a powerful reframe of acceptance. Okay, what's next after acceptance?
Increasing awareness and self-awareness. Awareness is about being tuned into your environment, paying attention to what people are actually saying and doing their words, tone, body language, not being lost in your own thoughts on autopilot. It helps you spot those red flags early. It also means having a healthy bit of skepticism, not full-blown paranoia, but not being naive either.
And self-awareness, that's looking inward.
Exactly. Understanding yourself deeply, your personality, strengths, weaknesses, your values, what motivates you, what triggers you, how you tend to react, knowing yourself clearly, having a strong internal compass.
How does high self-awareness protect you?
It makes it much harder for manipulators to mess with your head, to control your thoughts or perceptions, because you know yourself. You have a solid internal sense of reality to check things against. If you have low self-awareness or maybe a false, inflated idea of yourself, you're much easier to manipulate.
Is that feeling of dissonance, like when something feels off, part of self-awareness?
Absolutely. That uncomfortable feeling when someone tries to steer your thoughts or behavior in a way that clashes with your internal sense, that's your self-awareness system flashing a warning light. Hey, something's not right here. If someone's feeding you filtered information to turn you against a friend, your awareness of their behavior combined with your self-awareness, that gut feeling, that tension alerts you. It stops the manipulation from landing easily.
Makes sense. Building self-esteem is also highlighted as critical, right?
Oh, hugely critical. Maybe the most crucial defense layer. Low self-esteem is like leaving the door wide open for manipulators.
So how do you build it? What are the practical steps?
The sources offer several self-help type techniques. First, be kinder to yourself. Stop the negative self-talk, the constant self-blame, especially after mistakes. Challenge those harsh conclusions you jump to about yourself. Be your own cheerleader, your own supportive friend. Learn from mistakes, don't just dwell on them.
Okay, self-compassion. What else?
Stop comparing yourself to others. Constantly wanting what others have status. Stuff creates vulnerabilities manipulators love to exploit. Quick money schemes, status symbols. Focus on your own path, your own progress.
Easier said than done sometimes.
Totally. Another tip is to focus on your work or goals. Set meaningful goals, small and large, based on your interests. Work towards them. Achieving things, even small things, builds competence and confidence. Stop measuring your life against snapshots of others' lives. That just kills self-esteem and invites negativity.
Choose your company wisely, too.
Definitely. Spend time with positive people who genuinely make you feel good. Negativity is contagious and erodes self-esteem. And finally, exercise.
Exercise for self-esteem.
Yeah. Studies show it boosts motivation, confidence, feelings of control, releases those feel-good hormones. It's a powerful, practical tool.
Those are concrete actions. What about controlling your reactions in the moment?
This is fundamental. You only control your response, right? Not what others say or do. So when conflict arises, especially with a suspected manipulator, shift your focus. Don't get bogged down in who's to blame. Focus on resolving the conflict rationally, if possible.
Because manipulators expect an emotional reaction.
Exactly. They often want you to get angry, upset, defensive. They're usually prepared for that. It might even be their goal.
So flip the script.
Yeah. React calmly, rationally when they expect fireworks. It sets new rules for the interaction, puts them on the back foot. They might try to play the victim then. Why are you being so cold? But if you stay calm and rational, their usual tactics lose power.
Think before you leap.
Absolutely. Avoid reacting purely out of strong emotion like anger. Pause. Think about the long-term consequences of your reaction. Make it a calculated response, not just a reflex. Ask yourself, why are they trying to upset me? Usually it's to destabilize you, to control you. Realizing that getting upset actually benefits them can be really empowering.
Any techniques for that pause?
Deep breathing is classic. Just creating a few seconds of space between the trigger and your response allows your rational brain to catch up. Also, Remember, you assign meaning to situations. Don't let that meaning lead to a self-damaging reaction. Your response shouldn't undermine your own long-term goals or well-being.
And the questions you ask yourself matter.
Hugely. Instead of, why me, or how dare they, ask, how can I best resolve this? Or how do I maintain my dignity here? The questions frame your thinking and guide your response. Ultimately, the material stresses, you are only manipulated if you allow yourself to surrender in that psychological game. Don't give them permission.
Okay, next defense. Become assertive.
Right. Assertiveness is that sweet spot, not passive, letting people walk all over you, not aggressive, trying to dominate others. It's firm, but diplomatic.
What does it require?
It really requires decent self-esteem, mental clarity, emotional intelligence. Being assertive makes you a manipulator's nightmare, apparently.
What does it look like in action?
Respecting others' views and needs while clearly and strongly stating your own. Requesting that others respect your rights. Seeking fair, win-win solutions in disputes, everyone compromises a bit. Setting clear boundaries and enforcing them respectfully but firmly.
How about communication style?
Relaxed but firm voice. Fluent, sincere. Cooperative tone. Staying logical and steady even when things get heated. Not raising your voice. Non-verbally.
Yeah.
Maintaining eye contact, open body language, good posture these project confidence. Using facial expressions to show disagreement respectfully.
And assertiveness is direct.
Yes, very. Assertive people tend to be direct about what they want or think. Manipulators often rely on indirectness, hints, implications. Directness makes you hard to trap. An assertive person might even directly ask a manipulator, what is your actual intention here?
Puts them on the spot.
Exactly. Assertiveness is really about self-respect, valuing your own rights and needs as much as you value others. It's about empowerment and dignity.
Okay. Managing your mood is also on the list. How does that play into defense?
Big mood swings make you more vulnerable. When you're feeling low, anxious, or unstable, you're easier to influence or provoke. The material specifically points to diet.
Diet affects mood enough to impact manipulation vulnerability.
It seems so. Lack of essential vitamins, minerals, omega-3s can affect brain function, contributing to sadness or depression. Getting the right amount of complex carbohydrates is important for stable energy glucose for the brain, which supports concentration, judgment, and even self-esteem. Too little or too much can impact self-image too.
What about sugar and caffeine?
They cause those energy spikes and then crashes. Over time, that roller coaster can damage self-esteem and make you more susceptible during the lows.
And alcohol.
It's a tricky one. A social lubricant, right, can temporarily boost confidence, lower inhibitions, but the crash afterwards definitely harms self-esteem, and those lowered inhibitions can lead you to say or do things, reveal information that a manipulator can later use against you. Stable mood management is key for resilience.
Makes sense. And the final protective factor mentioned is becoming autonomous.
Autonomy. Taking control of your own life decisions. Using your own free will. Without feeling pressured internally or externally. That feeling of freedom. Having a clear self-identity and being in control of it.
Is it linked to happiness?
Strongly, according to research cited. Even more strongly than wealth, apparently. It's seen as a core human value, a fundamental need.
How do you maintain autonomy in relationships, which often involve compromise?
It's crucial not to lose yourself. Even in a close couple or family, maintain your individual goals, your identity. Don't do things just because of obligation or expectation. Be authentic to who you are. Power imbalances in relationships are a huge red flag for loss of autonomy.
So choose partners carefully.
Absolutely. Choose partners who respect your autonomy, who want you to be your own person. Avoid relationships based solely on things like financial status, looks, or social connections. That's the golden cage trap again. Sacrificing your freedom, yourself, for perceived security or comfort. The advice is to develop your own maturity and sensitivity first, then choose partners who align with that.
So really, protecting yourself from dark psychology. It's not about learning counterattacks. It's about building a strong inner foundation.
That's the core message, yeah. Fortifying yourself from within. Building acceptance, self-awareness, self-esteem, learning to control your reactions, becoming assertive, managing your mood, and embracing your own autonomy.
It sounds like a lot of work, but also incredibly empowering.
It definitely requires courage and conscious effort. It's not a quick fix. But the freedom and resilience you gain, the sources suggest it's invaluable.
Well, this has been a really deep dive into a complex, maybe uncomfortable, but vital topic. We've looked at the traits, the tactics, the impact, the vulnerabilities.
And hopefully we've seen that the real defense isn't something external you apply, but something internal you build. Accepting reality, knowing yourself, valuing yourself, controlling your responses, speaking up for yourself, taking care of your emotional state, and owning your own life.
Understanding all this is powerful knowledge. But I guess the real power comes from actually using that knowledge, strengthening yourself, taking that conscious control of your own life journey.
Absolutely. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep investing in that inner strength. It's the best defense you have.